It really is a great honor to present my next guest, our first guest tonight. I suppose the word hero sounds corny at times, but I don't think you have heroes anymore. And maybe some of the youngsters need heroes nowadays, and they probably get tired of that word. They would consider themselves, I suppose, professional test pilots, in which they are at a tremendous skill. But it's just been over a month since their great courage and skill under tremendously adverse conditions made them heroes to the entire world. Would you please welcome the Apollo 13 team, James Lovell, Fred Haise, and Jack Swigert. Gentlemen.
Dave Scott, commander of Apollo 15, he kept saying, you know, I know it's a movie, he said, but, you know, nobody's going to go to the moon for another 100, 150 years. That's my prediction. I don't think anybody's going to go to the moon for a long time. And by the time they do, everybody involved is going to be dead. And all you're going to have is some of this archival footage. And you've seen how incomplete that is. But you know what they're going to be able to do? They're going to be able to look at this movie, Apollo 13, and say, that's how they went to the moon. And every time he'd say that, I'd say, Dave, don't put that on my shoulders.
There's something about the story of getting back home, which is one of the 7 great stories of literature. How do you get back home? And that's what this is.
He said, we sent your proposal, just that one chapter, out to our office in California. They passed it around to various movie production companies. There was a bidding on it, and Imagine Entertainment has the bid to do a movie on your book. I said, we haven't written it yet.
Michael Bostic, who worked here, actually by complete coincidence, his parents were in this, his dad was in the space program. He grew up in Houston, knew everything about that whole culture. He got us so excited about something that Ron and I didn't know much about.
Everybody in our offices at Imagine Films, well, they've had all the biggest stars in Hollywood walk in there. They were more excited about Jim Lovell.
Ron read it, and Bostic, of course, read it, Michael Bostic. I kind of skimmed it, and I heard things from everybody. I don't read a lot. I'm very intuitive.
And I thought that maybe Kevin Costner would look a little bit like me when I was his age.
I had actually said to people, other writers, I said, look into Apollo. Years ago, I said we should do something on the flight of Apollo 13.
I'd heard that Tom Hanks liked it. I'd talked to him once on the phone.
I finally got a call from my representative, and he says, you won't believe what I just read. And it was Apollo 13. I said, well, send it to me right away. And I read it, and I think within 4 days, I was talking to Ron about doing it.
About halfway through the meeting, I said, well, I really hope you do this, Tom. I'm definitely doing it. And he said, oh. And about 10 minutes later, he said, oh, what the hell, I'm doing it too. So that was it. We shook hands and went down and hailed cabs and went and started to make a movie.
I couldn't have been more happy with Tom, because Tom, in reality, is a closet astronaut.
I have always wanted to be in a pressure suit somehow. I've always wanted to play an astronaut. I've always wanted to, to shoot a vast section of a movie completely encapsulated by nothing but metal, glass, and switches, and I finally have a chance to do that too. So this is real dream come true stuff here.
I wanted the movie to be as exciting as it could be without compromising the authenticity.
We mostly do movies about people and less about hardware and science.
It was exhilarating, but kind of exhausting in an unusual way. I mean, I felt like I was back in school.
Because we have the real thing there, all we have to do is a little bit of homework, and we can establish what the real thing is.
I felt the job was to put together, you know, a great unit and try to work hard on the chemistry. Not only on-screen chemistry, but also what I felt would be the behind-the-scenes chemistry.
I was so nervous because, God, I wanted it so bad. I almost felt like I was just right off the boat.
When I looked at it, I said, I want to play that guy. I want to play that character. And Ron suggested that I just come in and read any one of them I wanted, and I said, you know what? I want to read that. And I luckily got the part.
It was critical that we put together a group of guys that knew that they had to be completely dedicated to a larger entity.
I'd say, you're going to be miserable, and then I'd look, you know, like it was a poker game or something, to see if they'd flinch. If they flinched, I didn't really think I wanted them in the movie.
He called me back and said, I'd like you to play the role of Fred Haise. And my wife and I danced all over the house.
Ron called me up and said, we're going up on this zero-G airplane, and for research. You don't have to go. You don't have to go. Absolutely no pressure. If you don't want to go, you don't have to go. Tom's going to go. Gary's going to go. Bill's going to go. I'm going to go. You know, everybody was going to go. So, of course, I'm not going to look like an idiot. You know, I mean, there is a certain element of my personality that is slightly male.
Ron wanted us to experience a weightless situation because obviously we were going to have to mime a lot of this in the movie. Pushing off, flying forward. There you go. Where'd Ron go? Hurry, get down.
It flies in a parabola. It goes at 45-degree angle up, and then it pitches over at 25,000 feet. As it goes over and pitches down, you are essentially in free fall inside the cabin. There's a couple of moments where suddenly everything does kind of lurch up, but then it stabilizes, then it lurches up again, and then you drop back down as the plane itself comes out the bottom half of the parabola.
Test directors came up and said, you know, we expected you to be a bunch of kind of Hollywood wimps.
We showed, I think, the guys down there that we were kind of up to it. And then we were saying, boy, did you guys ever put, like, is it possible to put a set in here and shoot part of a movie?
Ron comes to me and says, well, Spielberg had an idea. He had an idea. He wants to go up there. He thinks we should go up there and film up there. I don't know if we can do it. I don't know if we can do it. We're checking with NASA now. I was like,
I don't know how they gave us permission to do it. I don't know. Todd Hollowell did an amazing job of, you know, working the phones.
We kept pushing on this and finally got it all the way to Washington to NASA, to Dan Golden's office. And they finally came back and they said, yeah, we'll let you do that.
If we'd had to do it with wires, if we really would have had to try to create the weightlessness with wires, I sort of shudder to think what the movie would have really looked like.
The KC-135 was used for most shots where you see our whole bodies, so that we really could use the floating. Then we did a lot of the close-ups on the ground. They cut amazingly well. I mean, I can't even remember if this is a KC-135 shot or this is a ground shot.
It's a great illusion, the zero-gravity stuff with all the simulated stuff on the ground.
When we got into the LEM, they couldn't really fit the teeter-totters in there. And it came down to really just mime. And all it was 3 guys standing around going like this.
God, can you imagine anyone coming down and saying, God, let's go down and visit the set of Ron Howard, Tom Hanks' new picture, and seeing Tom and Ron directing Tom on an Apple box, kind of doing this while he's going, hello, Houston. If you were just going to go back and say, oh, my God, they've got a disaster on their hands.
Good evening, America, and welcome aboard Apollo 13.
I don't know if you've ever been in a plane that's diving towards the Earth on purpose, but it's, you know, it's a strange thing to want to go and do over 600 times.
They're going to be up in this jet doing, you know, 1,000 parabolas. It seems ridiculous. Seems like something will break. That frightened me.
Nobody wanted to let this story down. Not the actors, not the crew members, no one.
I had an acute sense of anxiety that I'd be the one who became violently and horribly ill and totally incapacitated and a failure to the group. Now I'm lifting up this thermos and I'm taking the top off and I'm like trying to kind of like God, everything's just being pushed down. I'm like trying to kind of like, drink the damn thing and then get some in my mouth and put the cap back on. And then we come up over the top of this thing and the camera's rolling and Ron's yelling action and I'm like, ugh. So, and the stuff starts floating out of my mouth. But I mean, I did that 12 times.
I didn't have to make any motivational speeches on this one. People were coming to work every day ready to give 150%.
I think Tom Hanks and Ron Howard are a great team. And they shared the same vision for the movie.
Everybody was digging through transcripts and looking at documentaries and thumbing through pamphlets.
It's not just like retro rockets go, rocket ship fire, it's not that kind of thing.
These guys are the accuracy police, Ron and Tom. I just thought it would bore people out of their... I thought these actors would just crack up, like be Papillon.
With Dave Scott from Apollo 15 here every day, we don't have to do that thing that can happen in films where, the director says, flick some switches. Yeah. But, we're supposed to have the comm link right here that we have to, when we're talking to NASA, we got to...
PTT. Push to talk?
Push to talk.
Usually on a hot mic internal, but a push to talk to the ground.
Where was that? Was it right
in your chest?
Here in your chest.
It's pretty easy to read.
So we stay hot. We're hot to each other.
I'm really impressed with the authenticity of the way they're doing this. And they're so interested in getting this accurate and precise down to not only the word, but the inflection of the word and the meaning behind the word.
Houston, we have a main bus A undervolt now too. It's reading 25.5. Main bus B is reading zip right now. We got a wicked shimmy up here.
Houston, we have a main bus A undervolt now too. It's reading 25.5. Main bus B is reading zip right now. We got a wicked shimmy up here.
Ecom, GNC, these guys are talking about bangs and shimmies up there. Doesn't sound like instrumentation to me. Working on the film was kind of like cramming for your final exam or something. You get all this information in your head and you're really focused on it. You're doing your homework the night before about the scene you're going to do the next day.
When I first was working on it, I really thought of it as, the story of the guys in the capsule. And of course, it still is very much, but one of the first things that we did once we committed to making the movie was go to Houston, see Mission Control, and I realized just how intense it was, how personally they took it, and I began to try to find ways to tell their story too.
It's just kind of a basic esprit de corps, in terms of 20 guys getting along with each other, sitting in the Mission Control room for 10, 12 hours a day.
We never lost an American in space. We're sure as hell not going to lose one on my watch. Failure is not an option.
He was the kind of guy who would say things like that. I mean, he was a bit of a throwback, probably considered a little bit corny by some of the guys and a little bit of a dinosaur, but they sure respected him. Once the rocket leaves the launch pad, flight director, he's God. I mean, he's got more power than the President of the United States at that point. He calls the shots.
Let's solve the problem, but let's not make it any worse by guessing.
Let's work the problem, people. Let's not make things worse by guessing.
They built Mission Control to complete specifications.
When I first walked into the set, I could have sworn I was in Houston. They've got it so accurate that it's a little bit eerie.
Ron is an absolute fanatic about every little detail being correct. I spend 14 hours a day here, and I leave and I go look for the elevator, because the real control center in Houston was up on the 3rd floor, and I forget, this thing is so real.
And he shot almost all of the movie with this Crane 88, with this remote head. And I mean, he just shot the shit out of this picture with this thing. So he would do all of his big sweeping shots with this thing, and then he would just drive it on into an actor or into a row of actors. And the way he created all that movement and all that activity around Mission Control.
Even though we were always sort of bouncing around 3 locations, the home, Mission Control, and of course the capsule, I made the decision to always treat it as though it was one scene, almost like you would a telephone conversation.
Apollo 13 is apparently also losing breathing oxygen.
Slow down.
And the astronauts may
An
have
electrical
to use
failure.
the
What
lens
exactly
box
does
to
that
fly.
mean? The honor of going to Marilyn and Jim Lovell's home for 3 days, 3 nights. Tom had gone there just before me, I think. And it must be something for them. They had to have these actors come stay in their home to scrutinize them.
Kathleen is a very perceptive young lady, and I found that she played my part beautifully. In watching her portray Marilyn Lovell in the movie, I could feel what was happening through her eyes, and I could feel the same emotions that I felt back 25 years ago.
She and I had a great time, but the one place that she would always hitch up is when she would talk about when she got the phone call.
I really didn't quite comprehend what he was trying to tell me. And then he said, well, didn't anyone tell you? Or hasn't anyone told you? And I said, told me what? And then he said that, you know, they were not going to be able to land on the moon and that everything was going wrong. And I guess, I mean, I just, at that point, I just hung up and I was overwhelmed.
I never thought anything about 13 being an unlucky number. And of course, neither, of course, NASA being the scientific, no-nonsense, straight as an arrow, you know, type of an organization, it said, you know, 13 comes after 12.
Naturally, it's 13. Why 13?
It comes after 12, huh?
As soon as he said 13, it hit her, just didn't hit her right.
If you look after that flight, you'll never find another spacecraft numbered 13.
Kenneth Turan of the LA Times criticized us in his review for making up this, you know, really hokey moment, and a few people wondered if that, you know, really thought we were crossing the line there, and it really happened.
Of all the years we had been married at that point, anytime I ever taken a shower, my rings did not fall off, and this ring slipped off, and to me, it was an omen.
You want to break up my crew 2 days before the launch?
They weren't going to let Mattingly fly. I argued with them on a higher plane.
And this is flight surgeon horseshit, Deke.
Jim, if you hold out for Ken, you will not be on Apollo 13.
It was discussed that why don't we just go from Jack Swigert's reaction to being told that he's going, which is yes, to Mattingly's reaction to be told that he's not going. And it's a great cut because you go from Swigert, who's been told he's replacing Mattingly, and he like yells, and then you cut to Mattingly's face. And he's trying to cope with just being told that he's not going to the moon.
Well, damn.
Once that decision was made, the commander was in charge. He knew he couldn't do anything different. And so, you know, he takes the responsibility of saying, it's my decision.
Must have been a tough one.
Swigert was a very competent command module pilot. In the movie, during the training, he fouls up, or coming back in for the reentry. And then in the actual shot, he's docking the two vehicles, and they say, some guy in the mission control says, boy, if he doesn't do this, we don't have a mission. You know, and everybody's worried about looking over at him to make sure he can dock. If he didn't dock the two vehicles together, there was two other guys in the spacecraft that could have done it. No one ever worried about it, actually. But it made a good subplot for the film.
We're hard docked, Houston. Roger, understand hard dock, good deal.
Unknown by a lot of people, he actually wrote the malfunction procedures for the command module. Consequently, he knew the command module quite well.
When I first put it on, it was the only bout of real claustrophobia that I had in the making of the film. I couldn't breathe. I had to sit down. For some reason, it just kind of flipped me out. And it had something to do with all of your extremities being really tightly closed up, the gloves and the boots and the weight of the suit. And then when you lock the helmet down, you then realize that you are reliant on the air that's blown into it.
And to be inside those suits and walk in the gantry carrying our, you know, air conditioning ducts, the units, climbing into the spacecraft and sliding over, that whole thing, I felt like I was performing a mass.
What was interesting about the pressure suits is that it makes you incredibly sleepy. All three of us just be out cold. And then they'd come on and say, you know, we're rolling. We'd be like, oh, yeah.
Swigert, he'd never even really run the sort of lockdown simulation. His description of, you know, how they tightened down those straps and stuck a boot in your shoulder and pulled so that you were so tight that you thought you were going to lose your circulation. He almost thought it was like a rookie trick they were playing on him. But then when he got to staging, you know, he's the one who talked about slamming toward the control panel and being grateful that they had strapped him down that tight.
That was some little joke.
You know, the launch scenes that were used that were all stock footage and the right stuff, I always thought were very, very impressive.
Initially, everybody looked at the NASA footage, and you have this spectacular impression of it, and you need to find some reason why not to use it. I mean, why wouldn't you want to take advantage of it? And when you actually went to analyze it, and you said, after you got over the initial thing of, man, that's just unbelievable, you have to do it, which pieces would you use? You start to see the disparity between all the different shots, and it's no longer as spectacular as you thought. We then said, okay, we're not going to use stock footage, we're going to use the spirit of it.
We tried to ride this line of giving the audience enough shots that seemed vaguely familiar. Like you'd kind of seen that shot before, but always putting a little extra detail. Trying to put the camera in some places where it never had been and never could have been. What if you could have had a helicopter right there?
When you actually go to start photographing things and make it look real, you see all the various items and things that make the real NASA footage real, is the various gases that come off the side of the rocket, even at rest. It's very humid in Florida, and the rocket is extremely cold because it's liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen, and the various gases in it, so it's like a refrigerator with a really warm exterior, humid exterior, and it creates an ice shield over the rocket, and as soon as it blasts off, it starts to crumble and fall down. The only way you can add this ice in 3 dimensions to fall at the right rate, to look like gravity, you have to do it with a computer, and that starts to define the techniques that you use for every shot.
I took the variety of elements that were created for the launch sequence. Sometimes there were live-action background plates, there were model photography from the stage, computer-generated elements that were created here by our 3D artists, and combined those types of elements together.
The challenge of a composite actually becomes an art form of shooting each element exactly correctly without the benefit of seeing the other elements with it, and picking them and making them each one uniformly excellent so that when they in fact put together, it looks like it was all shot at the same time.
This is the background plate that was actually shot down on location in Florida. The next element is the model that was shot over here on the stage. It's a 25th scale model. Then there's a matte pass that's shot as well. One of the next elements that was shot in the model photography was an interactive lighting pass, a similar type of a thing done for the gantry. This is a condensation gas that traveled up the side of the craft. There are CG ice particles that were created in 3D. The engine blasts were also created in 3D. Finally, when the shot was fully composited, then we added the shake as if it were reacting to the camera on the tower.
Houston, we have cleared the tower in 1313.
That's a sequence that I'm very proud of. I think as a filmmaker, that might be the most cinematic thing I've ever been involved with.
I mean, as soon as you create the task for yourself, well, okay, now do the launch. I mean, okay, so what does a launch look like? You look at it and you go, I don't know, it looks kind of like a fire extinguisher. What we did is, at that point, instead of trying to, reinvent the wheel and make up an explosion that looks just like a real explosion, why don't you just shoot it? engines actually start and it pushes down, it actually sucks the smoke back in. It looks like it's going in reverse. People thought that was the trick. Oh, you put it in reverse, or you rewound the film, or you did, what was the trick here? It's like, it's not, that's the real thing.
Buzz Aldrin came up to me and said, hey, in that launch footage, I saw some shots I'd never seen before. Did you guys, what vault did you find that stuff in? And I said, well, no vault, Buzz. We generated all that from scratch. And he said, wow, that's pretty good. Can we use it?
That particular shot where the ring comes off is, in a sense, a duplication of the real event. I kind of went with my impression of the way it should be instead of the real item, but still make it look like the signature NASA shot, because I've seen that many times and was incredibly impressed by it. And so we just did it. We just went on our instincts and shot it, and we picked a beautiful Earth, and we shot the ring with a nice lighting on it and all that, and it was absolutely, phony. Somehow the magic formula of all those pieces together, you believed it was, we believed it was the real thing.
This is the crew of Apollo 13, wishing everybody there a nice evening, and we're just about ready to close out our inspection of Aquarius and get back to a pleasant evening at Odyssey. Good night.
13, we've got one more item for you when you get a chance. We'd like you to stir up your cryo tanks. In addition, I have a shaft and trunnion.
Okay.
For a look at the Comet Bennett if you need it.
Okay. Stand by. Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here.
Say again, please.
Houston, we have a problem.
Houston, we've had a problem. We've had a main B bus undervolt.
We have a main bus B undervolt?
We had a pretty large bang associated with the caution and warning there.
Fred, being in the lunar module, had actuated a valve which normally gives us that same sound. And since he didn't tell us about it, we all rather jumped up and were sort of worried about it, but it was his joke, and we all thought it was a lot of fun at the time since nothing happened. So when this bang came, we really didn't get concerned right away. But then I looked up at Fred, and Fred had that expression like it wasn't his fault. And we suddenly realized that something else occurred, but exactly what we didn't know.
The problem with 13 was the fact that we were faced with an incident that was almost unheard of. The odds of losing three fuel cells and 2 oxygen tanks.
We're reading 0 N2 pressure in fuel cell 1 and 13 psi on fuel cell 3 O2 pressure.
And the computer going offline for a little bit, and the communications being disrupted, and the attitude jets firing and not being able to control the vehicle. You don't plan for that. If we had to train for all that going on at one time, I would still be down at the Cape training for the launch.
I looked at my environmental control system cryogenics display of data, and it said I had lost O2 tank 2, and I was losing O2 tank 1. I'm looking at not a single failure, not a double failure, not a triple failure, but I'm looking at a quadruple failure. There's no possible way that could happen in this spacecraft the way it was designed.
Right then was, I knew we lost a mission. We were going to abort and not even go into lunar orbit, much less land.
My concern was increasing all the time. It went from, I wonder what this is going to do to the landing, to I wonder if we can get back home again.
This was what we would call, in our parlance, we'd call it a funny. It was something we didn't understand what had happened, and that is why the ground is down here. We would strip this data out, we'd look at it in recorders, we'd start figuring out what had caused the funny that we had seen. And I was sure that we would ultimately resolve the cause.
If you get the little story in the movie, which is also in the book, Kranz doesn't want to leave go.
You close them, you can't open them again. You can't land on the moon with one healthy fuel cell.
Gene, the Odyssey is dying. From my chair here, this is the last option.
If we were going to save any elements of the spacecraft
time was going by. Time, the consciousness of time, and the awareness of the time, and the frustration at going 5, 10, 15 minutes into this process, and still not being at the bottom of it.
Without the electrical power, the command module was dead. Without the electrical power and without oxygen, the crew were dead.
If this doesn't work, we're not going to have enough power left to get home.
Most of us in those days were test pilots. And through the training that we did and through the years in testing airplanes, you get to have a lot of crises. You get to expect crisis. I mean, it's not something that you don't expect. You expect something to go wrong. That's the reason why you're there in the first place.
If you want my opinion of how they handled the situation when it happened, they handled it exactly like we'd expect them to. They were about as well on top of it as anybody could be who knew on what we knew, which isn't very much, I'll have to admit.
They know now what happened, and what happened actually took place inside one of the bottles.
An oxygen tank exploded inside what is the service module, where the main engine of the spacecraft, that completely crippled the spacecraft.
No one's ever seen it. You don't know exactly what it did, but it has to be dramatic. It has to feel truthful, and it has a bunch of different caveats on it to make it real. So it's not a slam dunk shot.
The ground, of course, was hesitant about using the lunar module. We knew that lunar module had to be used. And by the time, really, that they called up and said, you're going to have to use it as a lifeboat, Haise and I were already going through the tunnel, figuring out how long that lunar module was going to last.
Fredo, how long does it take to power up the LEM?
3 hours by the checklist.
We don't have that much time.
Flight Econ.
Go ahead, Econ.
The pressure in O2 tank 1 is all the way down to 297. We better think about getting in the LEM or using the LEM system.
Odyssey, this is Houston. We need you to power it down immediately. And you're going to have to power up the LEM at the same time, so you better get somebody over there.
We already have Fredo in the LEM, Houston.
I'd say this is as serious a situation as we have ever had in manned space flight. We've always called the LEM a good lifeboat under those circumstances. If at any time in the mission, however, the LEM had separated and we had gotten ourselves into a rendezvous situation or the command module being around the moon, then what you state is absolutely true. It would be a fatal situation.
The LEM was a flimsy-looking, spidery type vehicle. The crew compartment had no amenities whatsoever, didn't even have seats. And the construction was just as lightweight as it could possibly be. For example, the skin of the crew compartment was about 12/1000ths of an inch thick aluminum. That would be like 3 layers of Reynolds wrap put together. You could easily, if you were careless, put your boot or your foot right through that wall.
Because Jack had never been in the lunar module. I mean, that wasn't his strong suit there. He was a command module pilot, and he would come down in the lunar module, and we had to caution him, don't stretch your feet out because you'll push the door open.
Ow! God!
One of the heart-stopping parts was trying to get the data from the command module's guidance system to be put into the lunar module system.
Without knowing exactly which way the attitude of a spacecraft is in space, there's no way to tell how to burn or how to use the engines of that spacecraft to get the proper trajectory to come home.
Now, Jack, we need to proceed with steps 12 through 17 quickly. You're down to about 8 minutes remaining.
Okay, fuel cell pumps off, O2 fans, tank 2 off.
Okay, Houston, check me. I've completed these gimbal conversions, but I need a double check of the arithmetic.
I had an occasion during practice to fail my arithmetic test, and I was so concerned about being sure that this arithmetic was correct that I had actually called down to the ground, let them do the math.
We had to use the guidance that we already put in there. We could not look at the stars. To get the guidance system very correctly, I could take sightings on stars. But when the explosion occurred, all those little pieces of mylar, which were highly reflective, the sun shining on them, made thousands and thousands of false stars.
There were only 2 things really that you could do at that point. Being so close to the moon,
You had to make up your mind, are we going to come back as rapidly as possible by using the engines on the command and service module or the lunar module? Or are we willing to take an extra 24 to 48 hours, let the thing be on a free return trajectory, let the moon bring us back from its gravitational pull?
Use the moon's gravity, slingshot them around.
The position we are now on the Earth-Moon plane, we have to go around the moon to get back if we're going to use the DIPS engine. You would have had enough capability with the SPS engine, but of course we don't dare use that now. So we have to go to the backside of the moon and come back.
We expect loss of signal in less than 1 minute. When we think Aquarius, that's 30 seconds till loss of signal.
I knew what the rules were. Marilyn had given me the rules, you know. She had to keep it together. If she let her son see how much pain she was in and how afraid she was, then of course he's going to absorb that. And she didn't want that to happen.
Something broke on your daddy's spaceship. And he's going to have to turn around before he even gets to the moon.
At the door.
My oldest daughter said that she knew that things were worse than I was expressing to her because she could see it in my eyes.
I thought to myself, something's wrong. You know, my dad's never coming back. I'm never going to see my dad again. And, you know, he's basically, you know, I basically felt at that point that he was dead.
I was scared then, because she was obviously upset about it. And she was trying to downplay it or not, you know, like it'll be okay, they'll get back. But you could just tell that it was worse than what she wanted to say.
The men did not have more than a 10% chance of coming back. Well, this just absolutely was like a ton of bricks going into my stomach, and I couldn't swallow it, in other words, and I just ran through the crowd and went into the back bedroom and our master bedroom and just got on my knees and prayed.
It's far away and she's listening to the squawk box where she breaks down and cries. She went in the bathroom, got down on her knees and cried. That's the only time she let herself do that. She couldn't afford it.
Someone came in and said that the press wanted to put a large tower on my lawn so they could broadcast around the world. Well, this just upset me very much to think that, because at this moment, well, first of all, they weren't interested in my husband in doing a wonderful thing, that all of a sudden, because his life was hanging by a thread, then they were interested.
Those people don't put one piece of equipment on my lawn. If they have a problem with that, they can take it up with my husband. He'll be home on Friday.
We knew early in the game that the powered down levels would approach survival of the crew and the survival of the system. The systems would get so cold that we were worried that possibly the batteries might freeze. The propellant in the command and service module lines would freeze.
It gradually cooled on down to close to freezing in the command module, in some areas below freezing because water tanks, for instance, froze. And I'd say 40 or slightly below in the limb.
We discussed dragging out our spacesuits, but then we thought more about it because they were, you know, rubberized inside, and that our perspiration would then be in there, and we'd actually be in worse condition.
Closest analog would be if you're lost out in the woods on a hunting trip, and a cold front came through, and you're stuck out there for 4 days without a jacket.
To get the breath, the stage for about 3 weeks was chilled with like an air conditioner the size of a boxcar, to about 35 degrees or 36 degrees or something like that. And then you drank hot liquids.
The LEM had no means of heating water. Most of the food packs of that dry food mixed with cold water doesn't mix very well and doesn't taste even less well.
It wasn't too healthy. I recall that we went in there to get some hot dogs one day, and it was like reaching into the freezer. I said, Jack, put up all the window shades. Let's get the place nice and dark. And I woke up a couple hours later, and I was freezing. As normally happens, putting up window shades in space cuts out the sunlight and normally cools down the spacecraft, but in most flights, the heat from the systems will quickly rewarm it, and as soon as we get the window shades up, you'll be in normal position again. But we got the window shades off after that, and the spacecraft never did warm up again.
You okay? Freeze. Hold out just a little longer. As long as I have to.
The way I hugged him, I got him from behind and got him real close to me behind and held him that way, just to let some of my body heat go into his body. But he was pretty sick. He was sick for about 2 weeks after that flight.
Fred's starting to get sick. He's running a fever, and tempers are short, and these men are desperate, and God only knows. You know, it looks like they're not getting back.
All I did was stir those tanks.
What was that gauge reading before you hit the switch?
Hey, don't tell me how to fly the damn CM, all right?
You don't
They brought
even
me in
know,
here
do you?
to do a job. They asked me to stir the damn tanks, and I stirred the tank.
This was a moment that some license was taken with, and the reason being is, if you played these guys completely stoic and completely as who they were, you deny the audience of that common bond that I was talking about, that humanism that I was talking about earlier. No, this did not happen, according to Jim Lovell and Fred Haise.
We are not going to do this. We're not going to go bouncing off the walls for 10 minutes, because we're just going to end up right back here with the same problems. Trying to figure out how to stay alive.
Aquarius, this is Houston.
Are we on Vox?
No, we're not on Vox.
Yeah, Houston, this is Aquarius. Go ahead.
Well, we did have a shortage of lithium hydroxide, and the ground read us up a procedure in order to adapt some of the command module lithium hydroxide canisters for use in the LEM. And as they read this thing up, Jim and I constructed one of these things. At this point in time, I think the partial pressure of carbon dioxide was reading about 15 millimeters. And we constructed 2 of these things and put them online, and I think within an hour, the partial pressure of CO2 was down to 0.2.
If you look at the picture of the jury rig that we took inside the actual spacecraft, and you compare it with the one that they had done and showed the people in the control center, they're almost exactly identical. But the movie was pretty accurate about what was shown there. The little line that says, take 3 feet of tape, your arm's length, came right out of the air-to-ground transcripts.
Survival now became one of initiative and ingenuity.
You never know what events are going to transpire to get you home.
I thought about my husband and what it would be like to sit there with the whole world's eyes in your living room practically, and look at your husband and know to yourself that it may be the last time you see him.
They're going to burn the engines and steer it manually, attempting to keep the Earth in the window.
She knew his voice, so even if she understood a lot of the technical stuff, but not really, not a lot of the complexities, but she could hear in his voice when something was not going well.
Come to the right a little bit.
15 seconds.
She dripped in, I'm losing attitude.
Okay, hold it right there, that's it. Back, no, Fred, back. Shit, I'm losing it.
20 seconds, bring the Earth up.
Forward, Fred, come on, forward.
The crises that we had to overcome were more than what the film had shown, because the film only had so much time to tell the story. The only real maneuver that was shown in the film was the last seat of the pants maneuver, when we had turned off all of the guidance system and the computer and everything like that, and we had to use the Earth as a guiding body to try to get the angle back so we could make a landing.
Steady.
9.
Shut down.
We had froze that mothership for, 4 days beyond its design limits, because it wasn't meant to be frozen, turned off and frozen, literally. So there was still, in my mind, concern about the condition of the capsule.
How do you go in with these little entry batteries, which are just designed to do 45 minutes worth of business, and do something that even our initial estimates has got to take 5 or 6 hours? The initial impression by the team, in fact, we had a bunch of people in the room, and we were going around doing a combination of engineering and commiserating. you know, it was easy to jump to the conclusion that maybe this was impossible.
Ken, you're telling me what you need. I'm telling you what we have to work with at this point. I'm not making this stuff up.
They're gonna need all these systems, John.
We do not have the power, Ken.
Everybody wanted power. The propulsion guys wanted power. The guidance guys wanted power. The attitude guys, I mean, everybody wants power. It was a fundamental constraint.
Okay, I'm gonna go back and reorganize the sequencing again and find more power. Let's start from scratch.
Without him, they won't get back. And he comes to the rescue and finishes, you know, I mean, becomes a part of the mission again. An invaluable part of the mission and part of the mission's success, and turning that, what could be a tragic failure, into a triumph.
What? There's been an explosion. Oxygen tanks are gone, 2 fuel cells gone, command module's shut down.
Let's start on a procedure.
Well, the engineers have tried, but I mean, it's your ship. We gotta get you in there.
You need a break, Ken?
If they don't get one, I don't get one. Uplink completed. You got her back up, Ken. Boy, I wish you were here to see it. I'll bet you do.
Jim and Fred were in the LEM and using the translation controller to give us some velocity, and when Jim yelled fire, I jettisoned the service module.
Copy that. And there's one whole side of that spacecraft missing.
Is that right?
The whole panel is blown out, almost from the base to the engine.
It's really a mess.
Man, that's unbelievable.
Through this overhead window, this docking window up here, I finally caught sight of the lunar module, of the service module, as it tumbled around in view, and it was to me sort of an amazing sight.
Houston, we're getting our first look at the service module now. One whole side of the spacecraft is missing. Right by the high gain antenna, a whole panel is blown out. Right up to our heat shield.
It could have damaged our heat shield. But there was something we could do nothing about. We couldn't fix it, we couldn't repair it. I mean, if it's damaged, it's damaged. We don't know how bad it is. If it's really cracked, the heat could seep through and get into the spacecraft and, you know, burn us all up. But you just sit back and relax.
This could be the worst disaster NASA's ever experienced.
With all due respect, sir, I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
They jettison the Aquarius, and you hear him say, "Farewell, Aquarius, and we thank you." And in the background, you can hear really low, you can hear Fred Haise go, "She sure was a good ship."
Left jettison. Okay, copy that. Farewell, Aquarius, and we thank you. She sure was a good ship.
And I thought that carried all of that admiration. And in a way, the LEM and the command module and the service module are characters in the film.
She sure was a good ship.
Farewell, Aquarius, and we thank you.
The scene that was really bludgeoning for me was watching time after time the splashdown, waiting for them to come through the atmosphere.
Okay, LOS in a minute or a minute and a half. At entry attitude, we'd like Omni Charlie. And welcome home. Thank you.
The reason why the ionization period was longer, the blackout period, I think we came in shallow of this 2-degree pie-shaped wedge. We were coming in shallow, which meant that we stayed in this ionization phase longer than the normal 3 minutes, which added to the suspense of everything. You know, we didn't know anything about that. We were just waiting for being able to hear transmission and also be able to transmit back again.
We have loss of radio contact.
The ion storm is another issue where
there's no documentation on it. I mean, and everybody has a different impression. The astronauts, all we had to go by is the astronauts said it felt like you're inside of a fluorescent tube being lit up. I mean, so that doesn't help us too much. We thought, well, when you hit with friction, it would just glow red and then go on fire, I guess. And this doesn't really happen that way. It's a particular type of heat shield where the gas is being formed by its interaction with the atmosphere and creates basically a white shield which is protecting the ship from re-entry. And then later it starts to burn away. You say, okay, that's now the image. What does it look like? Well, there's a technique of shooting fire where you make it kind of liquidy by, instead of shooting fire at 24 frames a second, you shoot it at 4 seconds per frame, and so it gets really blurry and smeary and creates this kind of, look like an ion storm to me.
After all those days, it came down to one little moment, one little second, whether or not, you know, they were going to come through.
If it doesn't, there'll only be silence.
Mommy, you're squishing me.
I'm sorry, sweetie.
Odyssey Houston, standing by, over.
Okay, go.
Odyssey, this is Houston. Do you read me? Odyssey Houston, do you read me?
3 minutes, 30 seconds, standing by.
Odyssey Houston, we show you on the mains. It really looks great.
Hello, Houston. This is Odyssey. It's good to see you again.
It's again tradition that you wait until the crew gets in the carrier deck, at which time cigars and the world map lights up. And shit. It was neat.
I asked Ed to come in, and I didn't say too much. I just showed him this moment.
It was 20 years later, and when they were talking to him, but he still obviously was filled up with this emotion about how he felt at the time.
Ed looked at it, and he looked at me, and he said, "So you'd like me to maybe try something like that?" I said, "Seems like it might be a good idea." And he said, "Okay, we'll give it a try."
Because as a computer company, people come up with computer solutions. Well, you can make a CG parachute, you could shoot a model on stage, you can do all this. And it's like, it's too complicated. What if you take the capsule with parachutes on it, you throw it out of a helicopter and you shoot it? It would be the real thing. I mean, look, it would splash, it would hit the water, the parachutes would fill up, backlighted. You can't really miss. And you know, at the initial part, people were trying to talk you out of it because it's too simple to work. I mean, it's just too easy. And then I said, nah, we're doing it. That's what we're going to do. And then the real work becomes is how do you actually do it? You really can't throw a capsule out of a helicopter, so you need to build a rig that goes under the skids and becomes very technical again.
know, Ron Howard asked me if I wanted to be, you know, have a part in the film. And, you know, he has a lot of, his films have a lot of family members and things like that in them. And I said, yeah, I would like to. He said, well, why don't you be the admiral on the ship? And I said, no. I said, I retired as a captain. I mean, I can dust off my old uniform, put on the old shoulder boards, and be the captain of the ship. And that's what happened. That's what we did.
I think that all of us felt like we were really, you know, honored to be part of making this movie.
I think there's a great human spirit and of innocence and exploration and discovery in this movie, and America at that time.
How many times in this world has, in humankind, has the world stood still in order to see something go on? This is one of them.
It is. It's the most satisfying film I've ever worked on in my life.
In addition to being a very entertaining film, it'll go into the records as being a source of accurate data in the future.
The movie was not only about the Apollo 13 mission, but it was also about the Apollo era.
It was an amazing era. It was an interesting era. It's something that I'm really thankful that I was part of.
Your mission served your country. It served to remind us all of our proud heritage of a nation, to remind us that in this age of technicians and scientific marvels, that the individual still counts, that in a crisis, the character of a man or of men will make the difference. Adversity brings out the character of a man. Confronted suddenly and unexpectedly with grave peril in the far reaches of space, he demonstrated a calm courage and quiet heroism that stand as an example to men everywhere. His safe return is a triumph of the human spirit, of those special qualities of man himself we rely on when machines fail, and that we rely on also for those things that machines cannot do.